We now bring the conversation back here in studio. Of course, you're at home. Welcome to joining the conversation on our social media platforms. Our Twitter handle is @ANN7TV, or you can use my personal handle @Audrey Chimwanda. We'll be happy to interact with you and hear what your views or what your comments are. However, joining me now in studio is Thala Nyang from the African Diaspora Forum. He is the Deputy Chair in charge of West Africa. So thank you so much for joining us on Africa Tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Now, would the fact that the US president used a curse word change anything? Of course, diplomatic etiquette was broken at this point, but does it change the fact that most African countries are either producing undesirable immigrants or not?
I will not go far to say undesirable migrants, because it doesn't exist anywhere. Don't forget, the US, Donald Trump is very proud of. The fine U.S., the prosperous U.S., the shiny U.S. is very, proud today, was actually built from forced labor, from our ancestors. And I don't think we just need to call a spear a spear. This is not being a trademark of being vulgar. It's all about being racist. Because don't forget, it was all about comparison, because it compared African migrant and Panamanian and Asian migrant to Norwegian migrant, saying we rather have Norwegian migrant. And when you say Norvege, we're talking about white people. Right. So for me, it's all about Trump being racist and nothing else. It's not being vulgar. We know it's trademark of being vulgar. We use it all since ever. But I think this time around, the whole world still stand. And I think it's about being. When people talk about a new order, I think with Trump, it's a new disorder. And the whole world have to deal with the new disorder. Otherwise, I think, and Americans should be ashamed of electing the most, I can say, most stupid president since ever. So we shouldn't be ashamed, because coming from Donald Trump, it's not something surprising. So. And most African presidents, actually, head of state, have been taking very strong statements against Donald Trump. So
the new disorder that some would call it the disorder that you're calling it, is the new norm now that we'll have to be facing going forward, coming from the president of supposedly the most powerful country in the world. Let's look at the numbers now, Thala. One thing that these remarks have forced people to do is introspect, to see, the countries that they come from and exactly what could be done different, for them to live differently, so that, such remarks are not coming from a president like Donald Trump. Maybe there's a sentiments that are being echoed by other people who don't have a world platform to actually say it as it is. I was just looking at the numbers earlier. In 2012, it's 5 years ago, but look, the numbers are not too different from that. Mm-hmm. The total GDP of Africa was $1.3 trillion US dollars. Mm-hmm. That is equating to 2.5%, of the world's GDP, mm-hmm. which is 54 trillion. Now, just looking at the world aid, this is what people refer to when, when they call, African countries, they're always asking for help. They cannot stand for themselves. Do you think the president is speaking from an informed decision? When we look at those numbers that we're looking at the moment.
Okay, when they talk about aid, I always, when they talk about aid, I always go back to when most Francophone country actually gained independence. When we gained independence, De Gaulle, which is the former president at that time, says something very interesting. We're changing colonialism to cooperation. So I think it's still the same. Only the wording was changed. We're still under colonization. So whenever aid they give, I think they take it back. And that's been happening since the early 60s. So for me, there's no aid. We don't actually need aid. We just need Africa to get together, and then they can leave us alone. That's the word. So, right. And then they will see. Because we come from excellence. Mm-hmm. So, and then colonialism, and after colonialism, esclavagism, and after esclavagism, colonialism. After the colonialism, we're still living under cooperation, which is another form of colonialism. So we don't need aid from Western countries. What we need is Africa to get together as a whole, and then we can compete with the rest of the world.
Absolutely. Let's get more voices on this. We have Botsang Moila, he's a political analyst. He joins us over the phone line. Botsang, welcome to the discussion. What is your reaction with regards to the protest comments with African countries saying that, you know, they don't produce desirable immigrants, if at all there is anything that is called a desirable or undesirable immigrant?
Well, good evening, Audrey, and to your guests and the NN7 viewers. You know, Audrey, the last sentences of your guest in the studio to say we are living in an era of new colonialism. It's just that the name has changed from being colonized and being slaves to being an aided nation, African nations. And that's reality, you know. I am not that excited about what Donald Trump has said. Trump, we have known him to be a racist white person. I've heard the first speaker saying Americans must be ashamed of themselves to be electing a president like Donald Trump into office. I don't think Americans are ashamed. You know, imperialists and colonialists, they exist for the mere purpose of exploiting other countries. Africa, it is not where it is today. And African leaders should have known that before they get excited and they want to challenge Trump utterances to say we are not what Trump has called us. We are where we are what Trump has called us, not because of our own doing as an African nation from Cape to Cairo, but because of colonialism, because of racism, because of segregation and slavery. All those happenings that were created by white, racist European settlers in Africa and slavery to America. It is the cause of where Africa it is today.
Yeah, but some would argue to say there's two sides to this coin. There's the issue of poor performance, a lack of development in African countries that is being attributed by, you know, inefficient markets. They speak of corruption, poor institutions. You know, those are variables that have been known to contribute to the state of African countries. Surely that is another side.
Absolutely, Audrey. They are contributing factors, but we cannot put a blind eye as a nation on the fact that this African independence, these independent countries, now we'll use South Africa as an example, they are not totally free and independent from their former colonial masters. Even if they gain independence, as they call it, and they've got black faces sitting in government positions, the economies of our countries, the land ownerships, the minerals and the resources, including the government itself, the administration of African countries, it's been controlled by remote control from the former colonizers. We did not, as nations of the continent, divorce ourselves from the creation of the colonizers. Some are corrupt, and where do they take? If you look at a lot of African presidents, you look at Mobutu Sese Seko, for an example, they became corrupt, they stole money. Where did they take the money from? They took money from the former colonial countries, to the colonial masters. So this is an extension. This corruption that you see happening in Africa today, this poverty that you see happening in Africa, it is because Africa has never been independent. It has never been free from the colonial masters. It is an extension of imperialism today, whereby you've got the IMF, you've got the World Bank, and you've got all these stock exchanges in New York and London controlling assets and the wealth of African countries. Look at the South African Reserve Bank. It is owned and controlled over 60% by a German family. How do we call that the Reserve Bank and the Central Bank of the country? Those are some of the underlying factors. Yes, I'm not putting a blind eye or ear on what you are raising in terms of corruption, in terms of the conduct and the people failing to perform.
Absolutely. Botsang, we would have to leave it there. Time is not on our side. I certainly appreciate your point that you have raised. Just to get your final remarks, Thala, as we close this segment, just another point I wanted to raise with you and our viewers. But as I was doing my research, African countries receiving 162 billion, you know, in terms of financial aid. But it is said 203 billion US dollars is being taken out of the country due to illicit financial flows, and the Western countries would be responsible for that.
Just going to give you a simple example. In Senegal at the moment we're talking about growth. There is a GDP of 6.8% and they're expecting more. But what's been happening for the past 7 years, actually we're seeing French company taking back actually most of the industry in Senegal. And that's what's happening in all the Francophone countries. And that's what's happening also in other African countries. So wherever, actually, as I say, wherever they give back, you see, there is a flow of
and not much of that is spoken about. Well, Thala, thank you so much for your reaction. I certainly appreciate it. And just very quickly, the tweets we've been getting from our viewers, I promised that I'd share with you this conversation. I appreciate you joining us at PWNage_101 says, I won't be able to join you in the location, but seems many comments by fellow Africans are justifying this remark from the U.S. president. May I just say they're missing the point. Trump is basing his views solely on the color of our skin and white supremacy. Just one more tweet very quickly. Trump may have used wrong words, but is right, especially our leaders that are corrupt. We'll have to leave it there. It's time for a very short break. This is Africa Tonight, and we'll see you on the other side.